phones ringing, all that good stuff. Recording in progress. Great. I hope most of you guys were able to participate in our first go round about a month and a half ago. We've got Dobbs Davis, Communications Director for the ORC, joining us this evening. He'll do a little presentation for us, and then we'll open up to questions. As always, we ask that everybody is respectful and gives each other time. But other than that, we're going to turn it over to Dobbs. We'll let him get through his presentation before we do any questions and answers. Otherwise, we'll never get out of here. And with that, Dobbs, you're the man.
All right, thanks, Adam. Let me fire up the PowerPoint here and get the screen share going and all those mechanics. So stand by. Okay, now, oh, maybe I needed to launch this. Sorry, I'm going to try this again. Bear with me. Get back to the Zoom. Oops, where is it? Start the screen share. And that'll be this one. Okay. Let me get this to full size. All right. Is that viewable, Adam? Hello.
Looks great, Dobbs.
Okay, and volume for me is okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I was asked to give a presentation that is basically going to mirror what I gave before, but not constrained to 5 minutes of time. This is a bit of an extension and hopefully a little more thorough explanations than what we had before. Now, if I can figure out my advanced slide, here we go. All right. Some of this is redundant, but I'll just go through it again just so we know where we are. The topics I'm going to cover is what is ORC, what are the resources, our principles, other benefits, and some nuts and bolts things like what do certificates cost and how do I apply and so forth. As I mentioned before, our organization is over 50 years old. It was founded as a way to unite clubs with using handicap systems on both sides of the Atlantic. As such, it was the founding organization that developed and managed the IOR rule that some of us with gray hair remember, that segued into the IMS rule, a VPP-based rule. And currently, the latest iteration of this is just called ORC Rating Systems. The roots are very much the same as the IMS. It's still based on a VPP, and the bones of that VPP are still within the current ORC VPP. We're pretty large, largest in the world, in fact. We issue over 10,000 certificates in 45 countries. I just got our statistics yesterday for all of 2021. There were 1,064 ORCI and ORC Club certificates issued in the US, and about 150 double-handed and non-spinnaker certificates. So that gives you a sense of the size here in the States. Grew by, I don't know, grew by 30 or 40% over the previous year. Our ratings are not single numbers. So this is all very similar to what you all know about ORR. We are based on a VPP, just as ORR is. And some may say, well, what the hell is a VPP? Because maybe they didn't go to that class. Basically, it's a force balance equation that looks at lift and drag and stability force and healing force. So the drag forces that we model that are on the rudder appendages and the propeller and the hull are balanced against the drive forces that are provided by the sails. There's also aerodynamic drag, little components of that too, that are incorporated in the VPP. And then healing forces and how they relate to stability forces. These are all modeled to help help do the best job we can at predicting a boat's performance through a range of wind speed and wind angle conditions. And because of the size of our fleets, we can evaluate the VPP through the 2,000 plus designs that are typical in each year's ORC I fleet. We only use evaluations for fully measured boats because those are the most reliable information that we have to go through this analysis. The people that do that are pretty smart guys. They are some of the world's best yacht designers and technologists, aerodynamic experts, hydrodynamic experts. Some of the names here you'll recognize, but we've also added new research associates for 2022. Those are on our website if you're interested to see, but include people you may have heard of like Bruce Nelson, for example. We also included Adolfo Corral of the Botín, and also Mark Mills. So, we've added quite a few. We typically budget up between $50,000 and $100,000. So in euros, maybe 40 to 80,000 euros a year on our research budgets. So the income we get in ORC is turned back into research. And by the way, the organization, for anybody that cares, is a nonprofit UK registered company in London. So that's how legally we operate. An example of this sort of research that they do is taking instrument readings. So we evaluate the VPP based not just on the theoretical output from the program itself, but we calibrate it based on reliable input that comes from instrument logs. This outfit called K&D in Valencia are experts at this. They work regularly with high-level Grand Prix programs to do the very same thing. They create VPPs from instrument logs and help clients massage their polars until they're in very, very good shape. So we also use their services to do the very same thing. This is simply a plot of instrument log data as a function. For those that don't know, these are polar diagrams. So the radial coordinates are boat speed, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 knots, and so forth. And of course, the radial coordinates are true wind angle. And this is all color coded. I don't know. I just thought it was a pretty diagram to break up the text. All right, principles that we have in this organization are transparency. We publish everything. You can even buy the VPP once it comes out. The 2022 VPP should be out in another couple of weeks. We're still going through the fine tuning and the debugging. And when it comes out, it's available for purchase for 300 euros, at least for a few weeks, and then it reverts up to its retail price of 500 euros. But the point is we don't hide it. We don't think it's something to be a secret. And also, if you want to run test certificates, you can do it on our Sailor Services website. It costs a whopping $15 each. So it is a bit unlike the other system. Our media, our science, we're dedicated to science. That is our #1 priority. If we can't have a scientific basis for the handicaps, we don't move forward. We need to have justification for how the handicap system works based on scientific principles, and not throws of the dart or any hedging or screwdriver turning. Everything's equated. It's also published in our what's called the ORC VPP documentation. That's part of our rules. That book is usually published. It lags behind the other rules by about 3 or 4 months because our programmer needs to edit it and add what's changed every year. And yes, we do change it every year because the science gets better every year. And our fleet grows and it changes. This past year, for example, we picked up a lot of US boats that were not in the previous databases. So besides looking forward to the latest boats, the VPP will now do a better job through this analysis of the fleet for older boats. There's a chance to be able to rate Cal 40s better, or sleds or other boats that are unique to the U.S. fleet and haven't been in the ORC fleet for quite some time. Accuracy, we're dedicated to that. We are very much dedicated to measure accuracy, measure training. We were hosts of the last measure training seminar in this country. It was almost 2 years ago, right before the full shutdown. We had 3 days of seminar at the U.S. Naval Academy, and some West Coast aspiring and current measures came, and others from all over the country, and even some from other parts of the world. So we allocate part of our budget for training and the concept of uniformity and universal principles and standards for boats, sails, rigs, and so on. And we're inclusive. We have a feedback loop where every year prior to our annual meeting, we solicit and hopefully receive input from users of the system through kind of a parliamentary process where each member national organization, in this case U.S. Sailing, will solicit feedback from the users, whether it's St. Francis or New York or Storm Trysail or any of the clubs that are using the system, and then submit that to ORC, and the committees evaluate it at the annual meeting and render opinions, or, well, first of all, they engage in debates and discussions on what the submissions are and how they can be handled. And if everybody agrees, it gets incorporated into the next year's VPP. So this feedback loop available is super important. And professionalism. We have enough income that we can support a full-time staff of, I think it's about 7, maybe 8 people in the tech staff. And these are programmers. We have chief measurers. We have others who are technologists, let's say, and others that are technicians that just help with the process of evaluating data, putting them into a format that certificates can be issued. We have small countries that don't have the size to have a full-time rating office, so we have some in our staff that can do that. In fact, without U.S. Sailing having a full-time rating officer from June through just recently, I was the interim rating officer for the U.S. and my colleague Matteo and I issued all those hundreds of certificates that we had for the latter half of this year. I'll give an update on this on that situation shortly as I get a little deeper in the presentation. So those are our principles. Certificate options. There's basically 3. Club certificates are those where there is little or no measurement data available for the boat type. And so it's up to the rating officer to decide what the input parameters are for the measurement profile of the boat. So displacement and rig height and rig dimensions. Sail measurements are the one rock standard that we in this country insist on, whether it's a club certificate or an ORC I certificate. You got to get your sails measured by a sailmaker and logged into forms that we have made available for at the minimum the largest of each sail type. So mainsail, largest headsail, largest spinnaker. If you have a LRH in the ORR parlance, or in ORC parlance, it's called a headsail set flying. We require measurements for that. And then ORC also segments code zeros separately from spinnakers. So any free flying sail that is over 75% mid-girth and therefore a spinnaker, but under 85% mid-girth, colloquially we call these things code zeros. And if you have one in the inventory, they do count in the spinnaker category, and they must be measured in our system. So that's good, because that means that anybody that has one gets rated for it, and it doesn't create a bias against those that don't have one. So in other systems where they're not measured, they're basically free. And if you don't have one, you're at a disadvantage. So we take that disadvantage away by just requiring measurements if they are in the inventory. ORCI certificates are issued for boats that are not only fully measured by a certified measure, and that's the rig and the freeboards and an inclination, but also the hull, as it's described in an offset file, has to be approved and to be a higher quality than some of the offset files that have been floating around both in the ORC and the ORR fully measured certificates. What may happen, for example, is if you have a custom boat that was measured as a fully measured ORR certificate, but it was measured 15 to 20 years ago, it's likely that ORC will require some more scrutiny on what that hull shape is and whether or not it was measured or if it just came from designer files. We'll insist that for ORCI certificates that it meets the criteria of having been measured and validated in some way. So those that are getting those certificates may have to go through that process. Just depends on the boat type. I will say in general, a measured certificate will be, let's call it more accurate, which simply means you'll get a better rating than with actual measurements. Well, 99% of the time, you get a better rating with actual measurements than you do with a club certificate with only assumed measurements. The reason, of course, is that particularly production boats, they're not all made the same, despite what the builders may say. And there can be huge variations within a given boat type. Anyone out there with J105s, of course, knows this, and other sort of production cruiser racers like that. There can be enormous variations in displacement. And displacement is not the only, but it's a pretty important driver for rating. What I've seen is differences of up to several seconds a mile between a measured boat and a unmeasured with an ORCI certificate versus an unmeasured boat of the same type with just a club certificate. So there's tremendous incentive to get measured. And then one design certificates, there are, I think what did I say here? Something like 22 one design class certificates that are available for various boat types, mostly the smaller boat classes. And those can be issued provided that the boat is in their one design class trim, that there's no variations from that. So that's a way, if you have a FAR 40, for example, or a FAR 30 that is in class trim, you can get a certificate fairly easily. You still need your sail measurement certificates, but all the other measurements we believe are pretty solid. Then the last category of certificates are double-handed certificates, non-spinnaker certificates. Our policy is that if you have any certificate in ORC, whether it's any of these types, you can get one or more of the other types for free. So if there's one paid certificate of a certain type, you can get the other ones. Typically, people will have a full crew standard certificate, and then they may every now and then go double-handed racing. And by getting a double-handed certificate, you not only change the crew weight down to a default of 170 kilos, but you also have the opportunity to configure that double-handed certificate with sails that you race with double-handed. So for example, you may not want your A2 spinnaker on double-handed certificate because you're never going to use it. Whereas you want to use your A3 or your A0. Non-spinnaker certificates are just as their name implies. No spinnakers are allowed on board, nor any large roach headsels or headsail set flying in the ORC parlance. It's strictly main and jib sailing. So sometimes people want those for the occasional frostbiting or other types of sailing where it's non-spinnaker. For anybody that fancies super yachts over 30 meters, we do have a super yacht rule. It is separate. It's a different VPP. So that's a whole other system. And we are rolling out this year a multi-hull rule. It's been tested in the past season. It's still going under some refinements. But don't get too excited. This doesn't mean that you as a multi-hull can go out there and race monohulls. This is not, not allowed because the VPP for the multi-hulls is different than that for the monohulls. So, but it does allow a VPP approach to multi-hull handicaps that is new, and we work closely with the guys in the MOCRA system for those that are familiar with that. Okay, moving on. This is an example of the new 2022 ORC certificate. This is run as a test to just show certificate layout. Basically, ORCI and ORC Club certificates look very much the same. There's some key differences. ORCI certificates have this dark blue coloring, not only and labeled international certificate, but the information on them very much resembles what's on a ORC Club certificate. This is page 1. They're 4 pages. These certificates are 4 pages. The format as they are issued and available online is in HTML. We have gotten away from using PDF. Our programmer thinks HTML is better, faster, more universal, is it more adaptable. I don't want to disagree with him because he's a programmer, and those guys, they know better than all of us. But this shows principal dimensions of the boat and some other important information summarized in the first page. We'll get to some of the other pages next. This is an ORC Club certificate. It on page 1 resembles the same as the ORCI certificate, except of course it's branded Club, and it has a light blue color in it to distinguish it. Here I show segment of the front, the top 2/3 of page 1. The bottom 2/3 looks like this here. There's, as you can see, a kind of a summary, a summary of the performance of the boat in these wind speeds and in these wind angles. So it's just this is sometimes useful for, not even for us as sailors, because as I'll tell you in a moment here, we do provide speed guides for certificate holders. But race managers often use these to give estimates of what the speed is of certain boats in their fleet as they do course design. So, for example, Mark Foster is a PRO right now at the southernmost regatta in Key West. He's got a small but very diverse class in ORC, and he is, like all race managers, struggling to get a course that he wants to be in a certain length of time and translated to distance. And so he can use information like this to help him lay out a course. Oops, sorry, I went back. I wanted to go forward. So these are the things you may want to pay attention to. Notice that the drawings on ORC certificates are to scale. It's not just a generic cartoon. And they also there's also a lot of information just on the cartoon, girths for the sails and rig lengths and J dimension, E dimension, these sorts of things. And then there's other data, that people pay attention to, such as crew weight. That's a declared function. Stability here. Now, this boat does not have a stability index because it wasn't measured for one. ORCI certificates are required to have an inclination and have that data. You will see some club certificates that also have this because they happen to also have been measured. So, this area here becomes important for race managers, particularly for offshore races, because they want to meet the safety standards that prevail, whether you're inshore, coastal, or offshore category. All right. Now, page 2 of ORC certificates look like this. Same for club as international. And besides this time allowance table that's now expressed not in knots, but in seconds per mile, there are 2 fundamental, simple rating options here in time on distance and time on time, windward, leeward, and all purpose. But the real meat is here on the bottom half of US certificates for ORCI and ORC Club. I'm going to blow this up in the next slide. And these are custom scoring options that folks here in the US decided would be useful for their style of racing. This represents a variety of constituencies here, whether, as I said, New York Yacht Club, Storm Trysail, Annapolis Yacht Club, and others that have been using this system. So they range from the triple number that I think we may have spoken about before, but triple number is a 3 segment way to divide wind speed as a function of ratings as a function of wind speed. For all purpose, meaning a random selection of wind angles, or windward leeward courses. So VMG upwind and downwind can also be segmented into low, medium, and high triple number ratings, both in time on distance and time on time. And then a handful of other interesting ones that developed actually out of here in the Chesapeake, where weekend racing is often point to point. And in using the VPP-based system, they decided to invent a predominantly upwind mix of wind angles. And whether it's done is a single number, which means it's using a mix of all wind speeds, or in here, we've got triple number, predominantly upwind, triple number, predominantly downwind. And these have been used to, and actually even in the SORC in Florida, they've been using these options and are really happy with the accuracy of the results. I think both the race managers and the owners and sailors recognize that this can be valuable to get to results that are more realistic than just a single number generic rating. Now, there are some race-specific ratings. The Chicago Mac race has their own course models for what they call an upwind course. They also have an all-purpose course and a downwind course. So these time-on-time ratings represent what their course models are and what they use. Likewise, the other Mac race from Bayview in Lake Huron has their 2 course options, a Cove Island and a shore course. The Harvest Moon Regatta in Galveston is a race from Galveston to Port Aransas. They have a course model. And then, of course, up the coast from you guys, the Victoria Maui guys have a course model. If you all at St. Francis or whoever's in charge there want to have some big boat series course models put on this certificate, we need to talk fast, like in the next week or 2, to get these included in 2022 certificates. It's not a problem if they aren't included. We can create scratch sheets without it, but it's nice to have on certificates so that people can see what any boat in the US would rate on those course models at St. Francis. The New York Yacht Club guys, being really super smart guys, they decided that three number system wasn't it wasn't working for them, so they wanted to try a 5-band wind speed system for windward leeward. We, being a service company, said, sure, well, tell us what the breakdown is of wind percentages in the models and wind speeds as well. And they came up with their matrices. So we've put those now on 2022 certificates. So if you all want to try to use that, just be advised it hasn't been used before, and maybe we put you together with the New York Yacht Club guys to see if you want to share some ideas and standards on this. One thing I will do for all race managers in the States, is try to convene all of us in a Zoom call sometime in the next, let's say next month, or even the next few weeks if we can get the VPP ready, just to discuss scoring styles, share some feedback that others have had. We do have a race management guidebook that is, I just today edited hopefully the last version of it. And that may be useful for some. However, the discussions in the race management guidebook are only on the all-purpose single number ratings or polar curve scoring, which is a whole other, and it is the most accurate form of scoring for ORC. Currently, nobody, however, is using it in the US. I am actively encouraging people to try that, and we can go over that in a Zoom call, but it is a description of that and its use will be in our race management guidebook coming out soon. All right, other custom scoring options. These you've seen, I've talked about. This is an example here, these two examples here of the Bayview Mac race course models, and they are percentages of wind speed and wind angle. So these condense into a single number, as you see here, depicted in the certificate. Similarly, for the Chicago Mac race, going up the 300 some miles up the length of Lake Michigan, they've developed 3 different course models. And what they do is they choose, based on the weather forecast, which model they intend to score with on the evening before the start of the race. So they that's their approach. Okay, on the transparency part of ORC, access to our stuff. Some of the key features of our system are in this portal called Sailor Services. This is accessible through a free login that you can register for. That is off the ORC main website at orc.org. And here you can get certificate copies. You can use an extensive search resource to find, what is it? This says 131,951 boat certificate records, but I know it's over 140 or so now. 145, there is measurement records. You can run test certificates in here by downloading a measurement record into your own your own folder in your own account that sits on the ORC server. And with that, you can run test certificates, you can run speed guides, you can create scratch sheets and a few other clever things. All right, and scratch sheets are pretty clever. These online scratch sheets you can develop, either you and or the organizers. They simply select who from the list of search criteria. You can tick a box, add these boats to your scratch sheet, and then choose the scoring model that you want to use. In this case, it's a triple number windward leeward low model. The output looks like this. You can edit the number of minutes to sail. So there's some generic numbers put in there. By editing this, you can scale it to the race that you're doing. You know, if it's a windward leeward race, it's only an hour, or if it's half the day, you can simply add in the minutes of elapsed time that you want to see segmented. But what's more clever is that since this is an HTML file, you can choose your scratch boat by pushing one of these buttons. If it's your class, you'd push the button for your boat. And then the scratch sheet will calculate how much time you owe your rivals in that class, or in the case of boats that are faster, how much time they owe you as a function of elapsed time here in the columns. So that's pretty clever. This being an HTML file can be sent to competitors from the race organizers, and they can simply, you know, use the buttons as they like, print it out or save it or even use it online. So it's a nice versatile tool, and I think quite helpful when you're out on the race course. with each ORC certificate issued, we offer a free speed guide, which is a polar output. And graphically, it's shown like this. These, this is, are these HTML? I think they are also HTML. And they show a variety of things, but in summary for this boat, shows the polar curves for different sail combinations, a headsail, headsail set flying. In this case, asymmetric is asymmetric on centerline, and this boat even has symmetric spinnakers as well, which fit in the niches shown in green. So anyway, and the output comes not just as graphics and tables of numbers, but also as text files or CSV. I think they're text files that are already configured for Expedition routing software, so Expedition format, and another file type, I believe SYLK file, that is readable by other instrument systems as well. So this can be a fully digital output if you choose. And then there's something we call target speeds. It's simply an output. This is in PDF format that shows you what your target boat speeds were in a windward leeward course for apparent wind upwind, boat speed upwind, true wind downwind, and boat speed downwind over this range of wind values. So that can be handy. What are the costs for ORC certificates in 2022? Well, this is a good question. I've been bugging the guys at US Sailing for some time now. They keep telling me stand by, and I keep telling them, you better not raise the prices. You already raised them last year. I see no reason to raise them this year. So this isn't a guarantee, but I'm fighting to retain these same prices. This may look familiar because I think these mirror what the ORR prices were last year. So that way there's some consistency. The overall goal of our system, through all the principles that I've discussed and exemplified by some of the products that we create, is to give every boat, regardless of its design, a fair chance to compete on the water, and that the boats that win are the ones that are best sailed and are not fitting some sort of rule niche. I will say in all candor that I haven't seen a lot of type forming in ORC. I've been working with them for over 15 years now, and at our world and European championships, which are quite competitive. You don't see weird boats winning. You see normal boats. They're extremely well sailed, and they may have little features here and there to do rating optimizations within the 1 or 2 second per mile range, but there's no strong type forming toward particular boat types. And so I wouldn't expect that. Resources, these are where you upload, where you can download your sail measurement certificates. This is nothing different than ORR. And unfortunately, I don't have a link here to say, hey, here's where you go to order your certificate. It's still under development. Jim Teeters has been hired as the rating officer. You remember that from the last presentation. So he and I are working through the process now of having a better, certainly a better process than last year, and one that's more digital and less prone to errors, and will be easier for the users as well. But stay tuned. This is still a work in progress. And with that, I'm open for questions.
Dobbs, I have maybe a really simple one. If I have an ORR, can I just use all that data and put it into the ORC application?
Yes, absolutely. They're transferable.
And if I have both symmetrical configuration and an asymmetrical configuration, would that change my rating?
Well, theoretically, yes, but for reasons you're going to have a better VMG with your symmetric sail, right, in certain wind conditions, and the VPP will see that. If you're using both sail types, it's like it's just like the polars that I showed back here. This boat has both symmetric in green and asymmetric in red spinnakers. Now, this example boat is a Trip 40. So not a particularly light boat, not a particularly old or new boat. It's a kind of an IMS era design. And the VPP says when the breeze is up, the best VMG for that boat's going to be a symmetric spinnaker in somewhere in these wind angles. There'll be an optimization crossover. And then as the wind gets lighter and the apparent wind gets lower, an asymmetric will likely be faster, or at least asymmetric of the design and size submitted on the certificate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so if normally you sail with symmetrical spinnakers and you happen to have an asymmetrical spinnaker or two, that's not going to penalize you by adding those asymmetrical.
Okay, let's stay
Maybe-
away
maybe
from the
not.
word penalize. That's a PHRF
Okay.
term.
I'll just leave it alone. That's fine.
No, what it'll do is the VPP will recognize, as shown in these polars, where each of those sail types are going to be faster. And
Okay.
therefore it will reflect in your rating, but that rating in turn depends on what course type. So on a windward leeward course, for example, the asymmetric spinnaker may not affect the rating at all because it's not affecting the VMG performance of the boat. So it depends on two things: scoring model and what sails you have.
Got it. Thank
Awesome.
you.
You bet.
So we'll use the raise hand function. Gerard, I think you're up next with the question.
Thanks, Grace. Thanks, Dobbs. Very good presentation.
Thanks.
Two quick questions. I mean, we obviously made the decision recently about moving over to ORC.
Yep.
And, you know, there's a fairly substantial number of ORC boats in the Bay Area. So considering the
Sorry, did you mean ORR?
ORR, I mean, yes. So,
Yes.
you know, what's the, you know, when should owners start submitting their data to convert?
Well, when we have a process to do that, as I said before, I wish I had here on the slide you see a URL for you to just click and go from there. That's our intent. US Sailing is intending to have a portal, web portal. So where, let's call it an ORC web portal. You go there, there'll be a selection of options. I want to translate my ORR certificate to ORC. That will definitely be one of the functions that we're developing.
And are any additional measurements required in going from one to the other?
No.
Okay, good.
Nope.
One other
There-
question.
Sure, go ahead.
Will or when will over 16 knots be taken into account in the rating system?
It depends on the scoring. So if St. Francis chooses to use triple number scoring, the high range is a matrix between, I can bring this up on the screen if you all want to see the breakdowns, but they're actually already described on the ORC page of the US Sailing website and the offshore website, is all the matrices of the way the scoring breaks down. If you like, I can bring that up. Actually, what I probably need to do is quit this thing. Okay. Let's see here. Give me a moment and I'll find it online.
I asked because I was under the impression that the rating system only modeled for speeds up to 16 knots and not over
Oh.
that.
ORC goes to 20.
Okay,
It was ORR that had a range of 4 knots to 24 knots. ORC's range is 6 knots to 20 knots.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
All right, awesome. Lance.
Can you hear me?
Little muffled, but try again.
Let me try changing microphones.
Okay.
Can you hear me better?
Yes.
Okay, so similar to the last question, oftentimes for some of the regattas that we've decided we'll switch to ORC, in that time of year, we often start in 16 to 18 knots, and the wind strength is anywhere from the mid-20s to the upper 20s, at least several times a decade. How do you suggest we deal with that with a VPP where none of the numbers go above the top end of 20 knots?
In our experience, when you try to start modeling things above 20 knots, you get other forces involved in a practical sense in racing, whether it's waves or puffs of wind or things that can't be easily modeled, to result in the VPP saying, yeah, that boat went around the course in 24 knots of wind. Oftentimes, well, in all of our experience, if it's over 20 knots of wind, the boats will be racing, elapsed time, handicap differences between 20 and 24 knots are going to be trivial.
So in our
our
venue, as you know, we don't get as big wave buildup as you get in open waters
Yes.
in
Yeah, that
those
was mentioned
wind
before.
strengths.
Yeah.
So it's sort of oftentimes flat water and much higher wind strength than we have in, have modeled.
Mhm.
Do you think that you have any, do you have anything more than saying you're stuck with 20 knots and that's it?
Not much, to be honest, because our technical committee has been asked that year in and year out, both at the high end and the low end, and they steadfastly insist that that modeling behavior in sailboat behavior in those conditions is extremely complicated. It is not, the parameters that they use in the equations start to blow up with other factors. Now, waves are just one. There can be many others. The aero models themselves just they're not confident. So, we can do a study of races that have been held at St. Francis with the course models that were used. We can use ORC certificates and comparing against ORC results in windy races. And I will be willing to bet you're not going to see any significant difference in the results. But
Okay,
if you
thank
want to suspend your belief until we do that study, that
Yeah.
please do. By the way, guys, I grew up in Southern California. I did many big boat series over the years. I'm familiar with the venue. I'm familiar with the conditions. So I'm not just speaking some party line from lack of experience. I know the event well, and I actually miss racing there. I live in Chesapeake now, but yeah, I think in that one we'll go through the exercise of looking at race results and doing what I said, just seeing how they compare.
All right, great question. Thank you, Lance. Robert Bova.
Yeah, hi, good evening all. Great presentation. Thank you, Dobbs. I got a question. I see on the certificate you have an adjustment for the age of the boat. Is that
ORR had the same
what's that?
definition.
Was that?
ORR had the very same definitions.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, was that something that was always in place, and is it something that's adjusted every year or every few
the
years or
boat,
5 years?
What's called a series date is when the first boat of that type was launched.
Okay.
And the age date is the date that boat was launched. Now,
Okay.
there are frankly, the age allowance credits in ORC have been throttled back over the last several years as the VPP has gotten better. So we don't really use it much for handicapping purposes.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
You bet.
All right. Donna, I think, Donna Renz.
There's Don here.
Go ahead, fire away. I'm just trying to find
Alright.
the model.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm here. So first of all, Mr. Davis, thank you very much for this presentation. It's very informative.
Thank you.
This may be a question more for the St. Francis folks than you. So I'm curious, will the St. Francis accept both ORC Club certificates for Big Boat and ORCI, or just ORCI?
Our intent is to accept ORCI certificates for our ORC racing. We may have, for certain classes that have a one design, I'm thinking of the J100s and particularly the Cal 40s, where they can get enough boats to make a fleet. We may allow ORC Club for that purpose. But for general ORC racing in a mixed fleet, we're looking for ORCI certificates.
Great. Thank you very much for that answer.
You're welcome.
All right, excellent.
Um,
Skip?
If
Sorry.
I may interrupt, this answers a question of what triple number percentages are. So the low range is a 50-50 mix of 6 and 8 knots. Medium is these percentages from 8 to 14. And then the high range from 14 to 20 is divided into these percentages. So
Dobbs, all this is available. You guys can see it's all available on the US Sailing site.
yeah, where's my? Yeah, this is a PDF that comes up. Sorry, let me drop that down. There we are. Oops, that's a fee schedule. This is the, yeah, here it is. This is the ORC page that is on the current page that is on the offshore, US Sailing offshore website. And on this page is a variety of information. Some of it's summarized here, some of it has links to more information. And when you click this link, explanation of scoring options, you get that PDF that I just showed.
Right.
Okay.
Thank
Great.
you.
Skip?
Yeah, I have a comment and then a question. The comment is our boat is dramatically different in performance at 20 knots of wind and 30 knots of wind, and much, much faster in 25 to 30. I think Steve was laughing at the thought of trying to rate us at 20 knots when it's blowing 25 or 30. The question is on the offsets. Hull offsets are, is there a list somewhere where the existing hull offsets for different models are acceptable and not acceptable?
Yes, there is a list, but you can't see it. And the reason is, and I'll show you what it looks like. So this is an example where I looked up J111s today for some reason to see in our database for all these boats that have been issued certificates, J111s have been issued certificates. There's we're trying to consolidate the offset files because we have some reasonable certainty that J111s are built the same, even though they come out of different molds on different continents. We've had at least one that has been laser scanned, and we're trying to use that uniformity for offset files. You don't have access to this, and the reason is because that offset file is intellectual property of Alan Johnstone. So only authorized rating officers and ORC staff can download these offset files. Now, I can show you what it looks like with that cartoon. But the fact that, and this is just technical minutia, but we've color coded these things. Green means this is a designer offset file. It hasn't actually been measured. And we've also flagged these for which are ORCI approved. Now, this one, I believe, yeah, this one is color coded red and green because it comes from a laser scanner that has had the hull scanned from both the port and starboard sides. And the laser cloud integrated and developed into an offset file that is of the highest accuracy. So something that looks like this is ORCI approved. What we'll have to do is just grind through the process of knowing your fleet and seeing who is eligible for ORCI straight away, or who we need to get a little bit more info. Oh, there's a local boat. The skeleton key. So the other thing this does for us is it consolidates a whole bunch of data, rig data, boat data, stability data, from the, in this case, 27 certificates have been issued with the J111 offset file. Now, these boats are not too bad. You can see 4218 kilos in displacement, 4533. Standard deviations 103 kilos. That's seems like a lot, but for a production boat of that size, that's actually pretty tight. J120s are, yikes, at least 500 kilos, maybe more. Beneteau 40.7, same thing. They're just a huge variety. I will not open up the one on J105s just to save you all from that cold, cruel reality, which you probably already know anyway.
All right. Excellent. Steve Taft.
Hey, Dobbs,
Hey, Steve,
are the
long
wind
time.
speeds, yeah, are the wind speeds measured or imputed?
How do you mean? You mean with scoring
Well,
options?
Yeah, with the scoring options. Does somebody actually measure the wind, or is the wind imputed based on the timer on the course?
Well, for the latter, that would be performance curve scoring, where you get what we used to call an implied wind. We now call it the polar wind, but you remember that from the IMS days. It's the same principle. You have a course model, you have a VPP, you know how the boat performs on that model. And if you measure the elapsed time around the course, you can then calculate what wind speed that boat encountered going around that course in that time.
Right, but we're not going to use that in ORR, is that correct?
Well, we're talking ORC, and that's up to you.
I'm
all
sorry,
at St.
ORC.
Francis. Yeah, that's up to you all at St. Francis. If you want to use PCS.
Imputed wind will not work with current. We know that.
Well, yes, but our software now has a current input to it.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
The other thing is a little bit going back to Skip's point here. There is a huge difference between 20 and 24 knots. If you are racing a displacement boat against a planing sprit boat and 24 knots of wind, the planing sprit boat will put all of its time for the whole course there in one leg, because they can go, there's so much apparent wind, they can go dead downwind with their asymmetrical kites and are planing all the way down there while a displacement boat is just squared back and running. ORC would not accurately measure that. Do you think that ORR can measure the difference between a displacement boat and a planing sprit boat? Or do you recommend that the race organizers divide the classes up as best they can with displacement boats and planing sprit boats?
You'll always get better race results if you can divide your classes into boats of similar types.
Thank you.
Always. That's handicap racing 101. You'll always get better results. Now, some boats break free, as you know, and this is why, one of the reasons why New York Yacht Club thought that the 3-number system wasn't good enough, because they've got a handful of boats in their fleet that start breaking free in, 12, 14 knots, whereas the others don't break free until 18. And if in medium, triple number medium conditions, you get those handful of boats that break free, they really torpedo everybody else, because a lot of the bigger boat fleet in the larger or faster classes don't see that breakthrough until higher wind speeds. In other words, into the next level, triple number high rather than triple number medium. So TPs, this Boateen 44 called Interlodge, those guys, similar performance. They break free early, sometimes in the upper range of the middle triple number. Whereas others that are not quite so high performance, but are still planing in the high teens, you don't see that reflected in their ratings until the high number. So that's one of the reasons they divided it not into 3, but into 5, is to try to recognize that. All of us in the ORC staff and many others included say, well, why are you dummies even doing that? Why not just use performance curve scoring? Because then there are no discrete levels or, plateaus of performance that you're scoring with. You're doing it on an integrated curve. But to your point, Steve, yes, race organizers should always try to group their classes into boats of similar performance. Absolutely.
Thank you. We needed that here.
All right, thanks, Steve. Zach Berkowitz.
Hi, Mr. Davis.
Don't call me Mr. Jesus, that makes me feel so old.
Okay, Dobbs.
Thank you.
My question has to do with the relationship of ORC to PHRF. And I come from a one design classes, and this whole PHRF thing is pretty mind-boggling to me, how different it is from coast to coast. And is there a conversion?
No.
No.
Won't touch that. Absolutely not. Sorry. Because each region is different. I don't know what to say. What little I know about PHRF is they use what is it? J35s as a benchmark. I mean, and I do keep getting inquiries from PHRF fleet managers on questions like this. And the more sophisticated ones use our sailor services feature to go dig through, find ratings for boats in certain circumstances, whether, if it's PHRF, most fleets just use single numbers. So they'll just look at the GPH or the all-purpose rating in seconds per mile, find a benchmark, and then gauge other boats to that APH rating. That's certainly an approach I would take if I were a handicapper. But as everyone knows, PHRF is supposed to be an empirical system, and you're looking at observed performances. ORC does not handicap for dirty bottoms or old sails or bad sailing, whereas PHRF fleets sometimes face that. So our system's unforgiving. There's no subjective allowances.
Which is where it should be. And it kind of leads me to the fact that if there's two boats, identical boats, and they both have small jibs, and one races on the East Coast and one races on the West Coast, I don't really understand how a rating should be different. You measure to your largest sail, and it's very different, I'm finding. And there's obviously a need to improve the PHRF scoring.
I'll go back to my biography, which is I grew up in Southern California, and in the 80s, even the 70s, I guess, there were two systems. There was PHRF for the true newcomers and true casual sailors, and IOR for those that were even half serious. I think the sooner we can go back to that sort of structure, in this country, the better. PHRF absolutely has a niche in our racing environment. And I think if it goes back to its roots and is used for truly, casual sailing, where the minutes, my criteria would be, if you're asking about your rating, you shouldn't be in PHRF. You should be using a measurement-based system. It's supposed to be for casual. So, and I know that that's just sitting on a soapbox, but I cannot, in all honesty, be able to give any recommendations for what PHRF guys need, how they want to use our system to further refine what they need to do. However, having said that, I do know the fleet in Chicago uses our system. There's guys in San Diego that also use ours as a benchmark, or at least a resource. I've heard about this many times. Eventually, they kind of give up and they say, well, the serious segment of our fleet needs to be using a measured system, and we'll continue to use PHRF for the other guys. It happened here in Annapolis. For the slowest boats in the fleet, the Cal 25s and the Allberg 30s and the boats of that older generation, they're happy and still function okay with PHRF because they don't have sprit boats. They don't have boats of wildly different performance as a function of size or length. Boats that were built and designed 40 years ago, PHRF could sort of work because the deltas between rated performance were not wildly different through the ranges of wind speeds. Now they are, which is why this system is arguably more fair. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely helps a little bit. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, in all candor, I just don't know what to do with PHRF.
Appreciate your input.
You
All
bet.
right. Looks like we just got another hand up. Doug.
Hi, Dobbs. Thanks very much for the presentation.
bet.
I'm going to settle back a little bit off Zach's question, but instead of using the dreaded PHRF, I'm going to ask why or how is ORR and ORC different? Is ORR now being pushed out of US Sailing's handicap rating system, and is there a way that both of them can be administered hand in hand? With Jim Teeter's now being brought over to ORC, is ORR going to be phased out?
Well, that's a highly politicized question. I can share with you my thoughts. Well, I can share with you my thoughts on the matter, but they're definitely not official. I mean, officially, U.S. Sailing is pledged to, service any rating system. It's no secret the ORR guys have been struggling financially for some time now for lack of business. Some of their races have been canceled. Some of their fleets have converted over to our system. They just don't have the same. And again, they don't have the same volume of business that they used to have. We can afford to do a lot of things because we're huge, right? We operate on a budget of, I don't know, 800,000 euros. And so therefore we're able to afford a lot of resources to do a lot of things. It's economy of scale. Why is there two systems here? That's a little bit of a historical story. The 2004, 2005, there was what I call a tectonic split between IRC, ORC, and what became ORR. Initially, it was something called AmeriCap, because U.S. Sailing tried their hand at developing a VPP-based rating system, which was based on the same principle, the same framework as what ORC was using with IMS. Attempts to join everybody in some unified way amongst these different parties didn't work. So everybody went their own separate way. And in this country, that AmeriCap system evolved towards being what's you now know as ORR. The ownership of that went from U.S. Sailing to the Offshore Racing Association, the ORA, who's currently still owns it. Their sources of revenue are certificate sales and sales of performance packages and test certificates and other things. In the past, they were also supported by, generous donations from benefactors. We don't have that at ORC. Our sources of income are certificate sales, speed guides, other products that we sell. And the way it works financially, just so you know, is we charge a levy to those rating offices who issue our certificates. So the retail pricing that I showed you is not what we get. That's what US Sailing gets. Our revenue is based on a levy of 78 euros per ORCI certificate and 46 euros for ORC club certificates. So that's roughly what we take and where our incomes derive from. Why is it that, and US Sailing, by the way, is hands off. They don't advocate one system or another. Where we're stuck at the moment, although we are starting to see some path out is, yes, the optical problem of having Jim Teeters, issuing ORC certificates. Certainly, we respect Jim's integrity and his professionalism, but we don't want any opportunity for there to be leakage of data and resources from our system to the ORR system. Now, Jim could probably laugh at that and say, that'll never happen. Of course, I don't do that. But again, optics are what they are. So what we're trying to do right now is with US Sailing, structure a legal agreement and an NDA that prevents anybody from US Sailing from using resources of one system to benefit another. In other words, they're not allowed to do any development work for any one system using the resources of another system. And we're just trying to craft an NDA for that now. I will say that Jim and I work day to day quite respectfully and professionally. Right now, we're working through that certificate processing system that I mentioned earlier, where we hope to be able to utilize the best of what we both know in having slightly different approaches. And we're confident we can get to that. I think he too very much has the same principles of accuracy, for sure. We want to minimize mistakes, and that just means digital throughput of information, and that's where we're headed. In terms of what the ORR guys do with their rule system, I cannot comment at all. There's lots of certainly lots of stories about, Cal 40s rate great under ORR, or and they don't under ORC. Okay, I don't know what to say, but as I think I said during my presentation, the ORC now in having gotten a lot of boats in the MAC races are incorporating a lot of these older American designs into the system, and therefore will become part of the rating process, and their ratings will get better and more accurate. And the VPP will become stronger, frankly, by not only addressing more modern boats than you see in typical US fleets, but also many of the older ones too. Does that help?
Okay. That helps partway. I'm getting ready to race this season again under ORR for several distance races. What do you see as the progression for ORC in the next 5 years of West Coast, coastal and offshore racing?
Again, political question. St. Francis decided to do this based on their inputs.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to interrupt you, Dobbs. None of my questions are politically oriented. I am not a boat owner. I'm a boat crew. I'm a navigator. I'm only interested in racing, and I'm only interested in knowing what you see as a long-term forecast.
My opinion is biased, for sure. I'll say, yeah, everything's going to revert to ORC because we're bigger, we're faster, we're stronger. It's like a football team or something, but it's easy for me to say that. And I do absolutely put caveats in place. I hear a lot from boat owners and sailors around the West Coast saying, hey, when are we going to convert to ORC? I said, talk to your club, talk to the chairman of the sailing committee at your organization. Let them know this is something you're interested in looking at. or it comes from the top down, like at St. Francis, the race managers and Susan, they contacted me and said, hey, we're considering this. Help us out, help us to decide. In other areas like, I don't know, the St. Pete area, we're doing a ORC class, probably a few ORC classes at the St. Pete Nude Regatta next month, because the local organizers are fed up with PHRF. They're fed up with the politics. They don't like the results, and they want something different. And this is typically where things go. Yeah, I mean, again, we're growing at a faster rate than any other system in the world right now. So if you want to extrapolate on those trends and look down the road 5 years, that would be a logical conclusion.
Very good. Thank you.
You bet.
All right, we don't see any more hands up. Like to thank everybody for joining us today. Dobbs, thank you for all your great information. We do want to encourage everybody as we make this transition to ORC to make sure that you don't wait to the last second to start working on getting your certificate done. I know Dobbs and the ORC team is going to do a great job of getting these certificates out.
U.S. Sailing will do a great job.
U.S. Sailing will do a great job with support from the ORC.
I don't want to be the rating officer anymore.
Okay.
Oh, I want to go back to being a communication director.
Just make sure that you don't wait to the last second. There may be some issues. We had a conversation earlier today with the Chicago Mac Group and some others, and there were some data that was not fantastic or whatever coming when people went to make their ORR to ORC change. So
Yeah,
even if
this past year was terrible, I will, and part of that was Nathan leaving in mid-June. Part of it was the infrastructure of their system and making those transitions over. This SAP design thing, that was terrible. Ended up being almost worthless. So this is why Jim and myself and others on our team are dedicated to not repeating those mistakes for this year.
So start early, work on it early. Don't wait to the last second. We will be using ORC for the Stone Cup in May and for the Phyllis Kleiman Swiftsure Cup in August and for the Rolex Big Boat Series in September. So plenty of opportunity to come and race and test your boat out under ORC. We look forward to having everybody at our events. We still solicit input from all of you. If you have anything you would like to add after the fact, look us up, shoot Grace an email, shoot myself an email, shoot Susan an email, and we're happy to receive input from all on a continuing basis. With that, thank you all for being here. Dobbs, East Coast guys, we appreciate you staying up late. It's probably 10, 20 for you guys, so thank you very much. We'll see you guys on the race course.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks,
Bye.
Grace.
Goodbye.
Thanks, Susan. Cheers, Al.
Thanks, Dobbs.
All about it.